A human man saved a little alien girl, and days later, the alien princess tribe arrived. The day had started like any other, which meant badly. The sun was doing its best to roast him alive. The wind kept throwing dust in his eyes, and the metal detector he carried beeped every 5 steps like it was laughing at him. Most of the time, the beeps meant rusty nails, bottle caps, or some unidentifiable object that looked like it might once have been part of a toaster. He muttered under his breath, kicked at the dirt, and swore that if he didn't find at least one usable part today, he'd quit scavenging and become a poet. Then he tripped on a rock, landed face first in the sand, and immediately decided he'd be a terrible poet. He was brushing the dust from his face when he heard the sound, not the usual whistle of the wind or the groan of distant machinery buried beneath the earth, but a high, trembling whimper. He froze, blinking, then stood slowly. The sound came again, softer this time. It was the kind of noise a child made when trying not to cry. He followed it, metal detector forgotten, and pushed through a tangle of bent rebar and collapsed sheet metal. There, in the shadow of a broken tower, sat the strangest child he had ever seen. She was tiny, knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped around them. Her hair was tangled, her clothes dusty, and her ears, he had to blink twice, were long, elegant things that curved back like the fins of a bird. They twitched when he moved, as if they were listening on their own. She looked up at him with eyes that caught the light in a way no human eyes did, shimmering faintly like stars reflected on water. "Well," he said after a long silence, "you're definitely not from around here." The girl tilted her head. She said something in a language he couldn't understand, the words soft and lilting, like music that had forgotten its melody. "Right," he muttered. "I barely understand my own language some days, so that's a problem." He crouched slowly, palms open so she wouldn't bolt. "You lost?" "Hungry." She stared at him as if waiting for something. When he reached into his pack and pulled out a ration bar, her ears perked up, then quivered with suspicion. He tore the wrapper open, broke off a piece, and popped it into his mouth. "See, perfectly edible. Tastes like compressed cardboard, but edible." She hesitated, then inched forward and snatched the other half. She sniffed it, wrinkled her nose, and bit down cautiously. A moment later, her eyes widened and she shoved the rest of it into her mouth. "Yeah," he said. "That's how it gets you. First you think it's awful, then you realize it's the only food for 30 kilometers, and suddenly it's gourmet." She licked the wrapper. He sighed. "Great. Now you're going to expect me to provide dinner every night." The girl said another word, something like Tariel, or maybe table. He had no clue. She pointed at herself, repeated the word, then pointed at him. "Me." He jabbed a thumb at his chest. "I'm just me. But fine. Call me whatever you want." She repeated his clumsy name attempt and giggled, the sound oddly bright in the wreckage. He frowned. "Don't laugh. I wasn't making a joke. Okay, maybe I was. But still." When he stood, she scrambled to her feet too, still clutching the wrapper. She wobbled slightly, then reached for his sleeve. Her hand was small, fingers cool against the skin, but her grip was surprisingly strong. He said. "You planning to follow me home? Because I should warn you, it's not much of a palace. More like a pile of junk with a roof. Sometimes the roof leaks." She nodded solemnly, as though he'd just delivered a royal decree. "Wonderful. I've been adopted. By an alien child, who thinks ration bars are a delicacy. This is exactly the kind of thing they don't warn you about in the scavenger's handbook." He started walking, and she matched his steps, ears flicking at every noise. When a scrap of metal clanged under his boot, she jumped and pressed closer. He patted her head awkwardly. "Relax. That was just my talent for stepping on things I shouldn't." The trek back to his shack was long, but the girl made it stranger. She pointed at every piece of broken machinery they passed, chattering in her language. He shrugged, offered useless answers, and tried not to think about how he'd explain this if anyone came by. "Oh, her? Yeah, just found her sitting in the ruins. Don't worry, I gave her half a ration bar, so it's fine." By the time they reached his shack, the sun was sinking. He pushed open the creaky door, gestured to the mismatched furniture, and said, "Welcome to paradise. Try not to trip over the generator, it bites." She looked around wide-eyed, as though she'd entered some grand hall. Then she climbed onto his one chair, tucked her knees up again, and yawned. "You're going to sleep here, aren't you?" he muttered. She nodded, eyes already closing. He sighed, pulled a blanket from the shelf, and draped it over her. For a long moment, he just watched her breathe, the rise and fall steady, the long ears twitching even in sleep. "Right," he said quietly. "So tomorrow, I have to figure out what you are, where you came from, and how much trouble I just invited into my life." He rubbed his face. "And probably find more ration bars, because you eat like a black hole." The girl mumbled something in her sleep, a word that sounded like a name, though he couldn't catch it. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Outside, the stars were beginning to prick through the night sky. He tried not to think about how close they looked, as if waiting for something. His last thought before sleep claimed him was simple, and not entirely comforting. Life had just become a lot more complicated. He woke to the sound of clattering, not the usual clattering of wind shaking loose a tin sheet from the shack roof, but the more deliberate clattering of someone rummaging through his toolbox. He sat up, blinked, and saw her, tiny, wide-eared, and far too energetic for dawn, digging through spanners and wires like a raccoon discovering treasure. "Hey," he croaked. "Those aren't toys. Those are, well, okay. Most of them don't work, but they're still mine." She held up a rusted coil, beamed at him, and said something enthusiastic in her language. Then she tried to wear it like a crown. He groaned. "Wonderful. First thing in the morning, and you've declared yourself queen of junk." She laughed, bright and airy, and threw another piece of scrap onto the floor. The shack echoed like a drum. He dragged himself up, rubbing his temples. "You know, some people start the day with coffee. You started by dismantling my livelihood." He rummaged in his pack for food, found another ration bar, and tossed it toward her. She caught it midair, ears twitching like radar dishes. With practiced ease, she peeled it open and devoured it, crumbs scattering everywhere. "That's it," he muttered. "I'm going broke. Forget scavenging for scrap. I'll have to open a ration bar factory just to keep up with you." She smirked, clearly pleased with herself. Then she pointed at him, repeated a word several times, and jabbed her finger at the door. He frowned. "You want me to go somewhere?" She nodded vigorously, ears flicking in rhythm. "Right, because when a mysterious alien child tells you to follow her into the wasteland, the smart thing is to say yes. I must be the dumbest man alive." Still, he pulled on his boots and strapped on his satchel. The girl grabbed his hand without hesitation, tugging him outside into the blinding sunlight. They walked for hours, past rusted towers and fractured hulls of ships long since scavenged. She led with uncanny confidence, ears twitching at every gust of wind, as though she was following some sound only she could hear. Every so often she'd point at the sky, babble something, and laugh when he squinted like he had any idea what she meant. By midday they reached the edge of the canyon, where the ground broke away into jagged cliffs. He stopped, panting. "Okay, either you're leading me to treasure, or you're planning to push me off. I should have written a will." She ignored him, crouched low, and pressed her palm against the stone. She whispered in her strange tongue, then tapped her ear to the ground. After a moment, she looked up at him, grinning. He blinked. "Did you just listen to the earth? What are you, part rabbit?" Her ears twitched indignantly. She stuck out her tongue at him. "Great, an alien child who mocks me. Exactly what I needed." Before he could complain further, the ground shuddered beneath them. A low hum vibrated through the canyon, growing louder until dust trickled from the cliffs. He staggered back. The girl didn't flinch. She stood tall, eyes alight, as a shape emerged from the canyon below. At first, he thought it was some ancient machine waking up, gears grinding after centuries of sleep. Then the light struck it, and he realized it was a ship. Sleek silver, buried deep until now. Its engines rumbled like the growl of something alive. He gaped. "You led me to a spaceship. A working spaceship. And here I was thinking today's highlight would be finding a toaster that still heats bread." The girl spread her arms proudly, as if she had unveiled a grand secret. She said her name again, clearer this time, then gestured to the ship. "So this is yours?" he asked. "Your ride home?" She shook her head, ears drooping suddenly. Her gaze dropped, and her fingers twisted in the hem of her shirt. Whatever this ship was, it wasn't salvation. He scratched his head. "Well, that's just perfect. I can't fix a toaster, remember? You expect me to repair that?" She brightened instantly, nodded eagerly, and shoved him toward the ship. "Of course you do," he groaned. "Sure. No problem. Let's just resurrect alien starships before lunch. Easy." They clambered aboard through a cracked hatch. The interior smelled faintly of ozone and dust, but the panels still glowed weakly when touched. The girl darted ahead, hands gliding over controls, ears twitching with every beep and whir. She knew this place. He followed, muttering, "Figures. I rescue one lost kid, and suddenly I'm the mechanic for an interstellar royal yacht." The consoles flickered alive, bathing the cabin in pale light. Symbols he couldn't read danced across the walls. She tapped at them, pointed at him, and laughed when he pressed the wrong button and nearly ejected the floor panel under his feet. "Okay," he said. "Rule number 1, I don't touch anything without supervision. Rule number 2, I still want coffee." She rolled her eyes but smiled, a quiet, almost grateful smile. Outside, the hum of the ship grew steadier, louder, until it echoed across the canyon. The man felt a chill crawl up his spine. Someone, somewhere, was going to hear this. He glanced at the girl, who sat proudly at the console, her long ears glowing faintly in the light. "Your trouble," he whispered. "Big trouble." Then, faint against the horizon, he saw it. Dots in the sky, moving fast. "Yeah," he muttered, sinking into the co-pilot's chair. "Definitely trouble." He had always thought the sky was just a ceiling, blue in the day, black at night, occasionally decorated with shooting stars that mocked him for not making wishes fast enough. But now the ceiling was cracking. The dots he'd seen earlier had multiplied, spreading across the horizon in sharp, deliberate formation. Ships, not scavenged wrecks, not rusty hulks that groaned when the wind kicked them, but sleek shapes that shimmered like blades in sunlight. He slumped deeper into the co-pilot's chair. "Fantastic. You woke up your family's fleet. Any chance they're here to deliver snacks?" The girl ignored him, fingers flying over alien controls. The ship beneath them hummed, systems waking, lights steadying into rhythm. He glanced at the growing armada above. "Right. That doesn't look like a welcome party. That looks like the kind of people who fine you for parking in the wrong orbit." The girl said something sharp, quick. She jabbed a finger at the sky, then at him. Her long ears twitched like antennae struggling to catch a signal. "Me." He pressed a hand to his chest. "What am I supposed to do? Give a speech? I'm not exactly good with public speaking. I once tried to sell a toaster at market and ended up apologizing to it instead." The hum deepened, vibrating through the floor. Outside, shadows stretched across the canyon as the alien fleet descended, their hulls pulsing faintly with energy. He could see rows of glowing symbols along their sides, like living tattoos. The girl stood tall in her seat, chin lifted, eyes fierce. She wasn't afraid, which was good, because he was terrified enough for both of them. "Okay," he muttered. "You've clearly got the bravery gene. I got the sarcasm gene. Together, we're unstoppable." The first ship touched down on the canyon rim, landing with a hiss of steam. Panels shifted, revealing a gangway that extended smoothly, like a silver tongue. Figures appeared, tall, armored, and unmistakably like the girl. Long ears, sharp eyes, elegant movements that screamed authority. And every single one of them carried weapons that looked far too efficient for comfort. He leaned closer to the girl. "So, introductions. What's the plan? Do I bow? Do I wave? Do I run?" She hopped off the chair, grabbed his hand, and tugged him toward the hatch. "Of course," he sighed. "Let's go meet the heavily armed aliens. This day just keeps getting better." They stepped out onto the canyon floor as the alien warriors descended the gangway. Their eyes swept over him instantly, narrowing, their hands tightening on their weapons. The girl, however, marched forward confidently, tugging him along like he was a pet she'd found. One of the warriors stepped forward, taller than the rest, her armor gleaming with embedded lights. She spoke, her words fluid and commanding, but to him it sounded like someone reciting poetry at gunpoint. The girl responded quickly, her tone stubborn, almost defiant. The leader's eyes snapped to him. She barked a question. He raised his hands. Hi. Yes. I'm the guy who provided your princess with ration bars. She likes the cardboard-flavored ones best. You're welcome. Silence. The alien stared at him as though he'd just confessed to eating their sacred moon. The girl squeezed his hand tightly, glaring at them, ears flicking in agitation. Look, he said nervously. I didn't kidnap her. I just found her, fed her, stopped her from wearing a spring coil as a hat. Basic childcare stuff. The leader muttered something sharp to her companions. A few of them raised their weapons slightly. He gulped. Okay, not basic childcare. More like accidental intergalactic babysitting. But still, I didn't mean any harm. The girl stamped her foot and shouted, her voice echoing through the canyon. The warriors shifted uneasily, eyes flicking between her and him. Whatever she said carried weight. The leader tilted her head, studying him with sudden intensity. He forced a smile. So, friends? Maybe? I'm housebroken mostly, except when I see pie. The silence stretched. Then, unexpectedly, one of the warriors chuckled. Just a small sound, quickly smothered, but it rippled through the group like a crack in stone. The leader's lips twitched, almost a smile. She barked another order, and the warriors lowered their weapons slightly. He exhaled, knees weak. Well, that's progress. I'm not vaporized. Yet. The girl tugged him forward again, toward the leader. She looked up, said something softer now, her voice carrying the weight of a plea. The leader's expression softened. She knelt, resting a hand on the girl's shoulder, and nodded. Then her eyes shifted back to him. Her gaze was sharp, unreadable, but no longer murderous. She spoke again, this time slower, as if testing whether he could understand. He shrugged helplessly. Sorry, the only foreign language I know is bad cooking instructions. The girl squeezed his hand and said something firm, her tone leaving no room for argument. The leader studied the two of them for a long moment. Then she straightened, gestured to her warriors, and gave a command. The alien soldiers stepped back, forming a path toward the ships. He blinked. Wait, are they inviting us aboard? Is this the part where I discover interstellar hospitality includes actual food that doesn't taste like insulation? The girl grinned at him, tugging his arm insistently. He groaned. Fine, but if this ends with me being dissected, I'm haunting you forever. They walked up the gangway together, the warrior's eyes following every step. The air grew colder as they entered the ship, filled with the hum of technology far beyond his comprehension. The girl's grip never loosened. He muttered under his breath, I really hope your people like sarcasm, because that's about 90% of my personality. The girl only laughed, ears flicking with amusement, and pulled him deeper into the heart of the ship. The first thing he noticed about life aboard the alien ship was how shiny everything was. Too shiny. Every wall gleamed like it had been polished by obsessive robots with nothing better to do. He could see his reflection everywhere, on panels, on doors, even on the floor. Unfortunately, his reflection looked like a man who had slept badly, eaten worse, and was now regretting every life choice that led to standing in the middle of a space princess caravan. Do you people have, I don't know, a broom closet I can hide in? He muttered. Or at least a less judgmental floor? The girl ignored him, tugging him forward by the hand as they passed rows of warriors. Their armor shimmered with faint energy, their helmets tucked under their arms. Each one watched him like he was a malfunctioning toaster about to explode. He tried smiling. Hi. Yes, I'm the one your princess adopted. Or kidnapped. Still unclear on the details. Silence. Ears twitched. No smiles. He leaned down to whisper to the girl. They don't seem to like me. Maybe you could tell them I make excellent soup? Okay, average soup. Fine, terrible soup. But it's still something. They reached a vast chamber that looked suspiciously like a throne room, except it was inside a starship. Rows of high-backed seats curved around a central dais, glowing runes pulsing gently along the walls. At the center stood the leader he'd seen earlier, armor glinting, expression unreadable. The girl let go of his hand and ran forward, speaking quickly in her musical language. Her ears moved with every syllable, like punctuation marks. The leader listened, nodded slowly, then turned her sharp gaze to him. He waved awkwardly. "Hi again. Still me. Still not a kidnapper." A low murmur rippled through the chamber. Dozens of alien eyes studied him, each filled with suspicion. The leader spoke, her words cutting through the murmurs. The girl interrupted, stamping her foot, pointing at him, and shouting something that made the runes flare briefly, as though the ship itself was listening. He raised his hands. "Whatever she just said, I promise I didn't teach her bad words. She came pre-programmed." One of the seated figures stood, speaking sharply, gesturing toward him as though he were a dangerous weapon left lying around. Several others nodded in agreement. He sighed. "Let me guess. This is the part where you all debate whether to toss me out the airlock or just disintegrate me where I stand. Personally, I vote for neither." The girl ran back to his side, clutching his arm tightly. Her ears drooped low, her voice trembling as she addressed the assembly. Though he didn't understand the words, he understood the meaning. She was begging. The chamber fell quiet. The leader finally stepped down from the dais, moving with the kind of grace that made him feel like a clumsy sack of laundry. She stopped in front of him, so close he could see faint glowing lines running along her armor. She spoke a single phrase, her tone sharp but not cruel. He blinked. "A what?" "Sorry, I barely understand instructions on soup cans. You'll have to slow down." The girl tugged his sleeve, then repeated the same word the leader had used. She pressed her small hand against her chest, then against his. Her eyes pleaded with him to understand. He frowned. "Bond? Friend? Partner? Wait, don't tell me it's husband. Please don't let it be husband." The leader's eyebrow twitched, almost amused. The warriors in the chamber shifted, their expressions softening. He groaned. "Great. I've been drafted into intergalactic family politics. Just what I wanted out of life." The leader gestured, and a holographic display bloomed in the center of the room. Planets, ships, and fleets shimmered in midair, glowing with soft light. One section pulsed red, an enemy fleet, moving fast. The leader pointed at the red formation, then at the girl, then finally at him. "Oh," he muttered. "So this isn't just a family reunion. It's a war council. And you want me involved? I don't even know how to fix a microwave without setting it on fire." The leader spoke again, calmer now, almost respectful. The girl squeezed his hand, nodding fiercely, as though she'd already made the decision for him. He pinched the bridge of his nose. "All right. Fine. I'll help. But just so you know, my qualifications include scavenging junk, eating questionable food, and sarcasm. If that's useful in a war, then sure, I'm your guy." A ripple of laughter passed through the chamber. Actual laughter. He blinked in surprise. "Well," he said, "at least I'm funny in 2 languages." The leader raised her hand, silencing the chamber. She gave a sharp command, and the hologram shifted. Routes plotted, defenses aligned. The girl pulled him closer, pointing excitedly at one glowing line as though explaining it. He nodded solemnly, pretending to understand. "Yup," he said. "That's definitely a plan. With lines. Love plans with lines." The warriors began to disperse, returning to their stations. The leader gave him one last, unreadable look before turning away. He slumped against the nearest console, exhaling hard. "I can't believe this. Yesterday, I was digging for scrap metal. Today, I'm apparently part of an alien princess war council. My resume is going to look insane." The girl leaned against him, smiling sleepily. Her ears drooped as she yawned, already content. He sighed, ruffling her hair. Yeah, I'll stick around. Not like I have much choice, huh?" She giggled, eyes closing, and clung tighter to his arm. He looked around the gleaming chamber one more time and muttered, "If I survive this, I'm demanding an endless supply of coffee." The alarm started before dawn. He had been asleep in a room that felt more like a cathedral than quarters, dreaming of coffee that never tasted like engine oil, when the ship's hum shifted into something sharper. Red light pulsed along the walls, voices barked orders in that melodic language, and the girl was already tugging at his sleeve, wide awake, ears twitching like antennae in a storm. He stumbled to his feet. "Let me guess, this isn't the breakfast bell." She shook her head vigorously, pointing at the ceiling where holographic lines flared to life. Enemy ships, dozens of them, closing fast. "Of course," he muttered. "Because why wouldn't an intergalactic armada show up before I've brushed my teeth?" The leader stormed into the chamber, armor alive with light, her presence commanding. She spoke fast, clipped, decisive. The warriors sprang to action, ships maneuvering in perfect synchrony. Then her eyes cut to him. He raised his hands. "What? Me? You've got plasma cannons, stealth fighters, a ship the size of a small mountain, and you're looking at me? Do I look like a secret weapon?" The girl grabbed his hand and said something soft, firm, and stubborn. The leader's gaze softened for just a moment, then she nodded. He sighed. "Fine, but if anyone asks, I'm only here because a child peer-pressured me." The council chamber transformed into a command center. Holograms bloomed with trajectories, shields, weapons. The enemy fleet's red glow pressed closer, like claws reaching across space. His job, apparently, was to sit in the co-pilot's chair and not panic loudly. The girl leaned over the console, tapping at symbols. Somehow, she knew exactly what to do. Her small hand steady. He stared at her, baffled. "You're 5 years old. How are you piloting a warship?" "At 5, I couldn't even tie my shoes." She gave him a look that said his incompetence was entirely his problem. The first wave of enemy fire slammed into their shields. The ship shuddered, lights flickering. He yelped, clutching the armrest. "Okay, that was fun. Do it again, and I'm filing a complaint." The leader barked another command. Their fleet surged forward, ships darting like silver fish through a storm of plasma. Explosions flared, silence blooming briefly in the void before sound returned as vibrations under their feet. And somehow, through the chaos, he found himself shouting advice. Not because he understood tactics, he barely understood tic-tac-toe, but because panic made him loud. "No, don't go left, they're expecting left. Go right. Yes, right, always go right. Except when you shouldn't." To his horror, the pilot actually listened. The ship rolled, enemy fire whizzing past. "Oh no," he groaned. "I've become useful. This is how they'll trick me into staying forever." The girl laughed mid-battle, her tiny voice cutting through alarms. She clung to his arm with one hand, the other steady on the controls. Her trust in him was absolute, even if his trust in himself was shaky at best. The fight raged for hours, ships spiraling, weapons blazing, shields flickering dangerously low. At one point he thought the ceiling would cave in, but the leader's calm commands never wavered. She was fire and ice, fury and focus. And beside her, the princess child who refused to let go of him, who believed so fiercely that he mattered, that he began to believe it too. When the enemy finally broke, retreating into the void, the chamber erupted in cheers. Warriors pounded their chests, weapons raised in triumph. The girl threw her arms around him, laughing so hard her ears quivered uncontrollably. He laughed too, breathless. "We survived. I survived. And I didn't even wet myself." "Much." The leader approached, her armor dimming as the battle ended. She studied him in silence, then offered a single, deliberate nod. Respect. The kind that didn't come easily. He scratched the back of his neck. "So, I guess I'm not an accidental kidnapper anymore. Maybe more of an honorary babysitter." The girl shouted a word, clear, proud, full of joy. The warriors echoed it, their voices shaking the walls. Whatever it meant, he knew it wasn't babysitter. It was something bigger. Days later, when the ships rested and peace was declared, he found himself back in the canyon where it all started. The girl sat beside him, nibbling on a ration bar with the same delight as before, despite being heir to half the stars. He looked at her and chuckled. "You know, I thought I saved you that day. But I think it was the other way around. You dragged me out of a hole I didn't even know I was in." She leaned against him, eyes closing, ears twitching as if agreeing. The leader stood nearby, arms folded, watching them with the faintest trace of amusement. For once, her eyes weren't suspicious. They were trusting. He stretched out, gazing at the sky. So that's it, huh? No more scavenger life. Guess I'm stuck being the weird human who helped save a princess tribe. Honestly, not the worst career change. The girl murmured something soft in her sleep, clutching his sleeve like always. He smiled. Yeah, I'll stick around. Someone's got to keep you out of trouble. Or, more likely, get dragged into it with you. Above them, the stars glittered, vast and endless. For the first time in years, he didn't feel small beneath them. He felt like he belonged, even if it was in the most unlikely place imaginable, at the side of a long-eared alien princess who had chosen him, and a people who had finally decided he was worth choosing too.